It's a windy day here at Kiewit Cottage, and this is Professor Ben Kiewit talking to you in your pre-press Print 7577 class about the PIA's pre-press trainee manual section 3.4 font management. This is not going to be the most exciting, but it is an important chapter to go through. Font management is one of those things like doing boring push-ups that makes you a better athlete that we need to be good at, because this is where jobs go to fail, especially jobs involving any sort of automation, data integration, or variable data type work. If you have things like fonts and other links that are badly managed and your computer has to run an automatic cycle to be able to do things, you're going to have a bad time. So we're going to go through this today. We're probably not going to go through a whole lot more than talking about the different types of typefaces that are available for computer use. We briefly glanced at this in the past when we were originally talking about digital file types in 1.3, but we are not going to look at them so hard word to say, cursorily? Oh well, I guess I'm not a speechwriter. Anyways, we're not going to take such a brief look at them. We'll look a little more in depth. Type 1s. This is the stuff my dad worked on when I was but a wee lad, when he worked for Xerox and helped digitize typefaces and create the digital print world that we know today. Type 1 is one of the earliest ones, and this was designed because at the time, you couldn't afford the resources on your computer. You couldn't afford the time, the processor power to waste it on converting vector information, tons of vector information, individual information on a monitor for the human to look at. This was an issue because it could have done it, but you would have wasted such an amount of time, and such an amount of your ability to output things productively and efficiently would have been wasted just trying to show you what your font looked like. So these were the ones where you had a screen font and an outline or printer font. So the outline font, the vector information about what the letters actually look like with the precise measurements and angles that make these beautiful letter forms that we all know and love, unless it's a papyrus and we don't love it, do we? These printer fonts were not shown on the computer. Instead, you got a low resolution, oftentimes low resolution screen font. Another reason to do this wasn't just computer performance, but actually just the resolution of monitors was not anywhere near what it is on your cell phone today. The size of pixels on your computer screen were too big to show the finite details of fonts like Didot and Bodoni and those gorgeous French modern fonts with the very, very thin hairlines, and then the thicker parts as well. The thin hairlines would be completely gone because they would not even constitute a single pixel's width. And the computer would round down or something, and you'd end up with illegible, unreadable, non-usable type that the user can't read. And so to make it usable, they made a kind of blocky, chunky, no offense, I love you still, Lego version of the fonts that could show you on the screen what it looked like. But back in the days, you had to be a bit better of a typographer who really knew your fonts a lot better, because you had to typeset by faith. Sure, the computer monitor showed you if it fit or not, but as to what that typeface actually looked like, you had to just know that. And you had to trust that although it looked awful on your screen, that Palatino was in fact a good choice and was in fact going to look good when output. TrueType was a huge step forward. It still only allowed 256 glyphs like Type 1. 256 is one of those conspicuous numbers. It tells you they're using one bit of information to store all the characters, doesn't it, as a directory? Because that's one of those base 2 numbers that comes up a lot of times. Whenever 256 shows up anywhere in the world, I'm like, aha, someone's allowing a certain amount of information on the computer to control this. Because that's typically what that means. If there are much larger numbers that people like the math comedian Matt Parker will look at, and when you see certain numbers in the billions that are very specific and precise, you're like, aha, I know exactly how much information that computer is able to work with, because they've hit a maximum that's an oddly specific number. And some of these numbers are recurring. 256 is the easiest one because it's a much smaller one, and it's been in the zeitgeist since computers. Anyways, so TrueType works on Mac and Windows. I didn't mention that about Type 1. One of the biggest weaknesses of Type 1 today is that it is system specific. There's a Mac version and a Windows version of different fonts, if they're old enough. In fact, I'm not even 100% sure, and I haven't come across one of these in the wild in a while, to know, would even a Windows font from the 80s or early 90s even sort of work on a modern Windows 10 machine? And could a Mac OS 10 name your favorite national park possibly open a Type 1 font from 1985? I actually don't have an answer to that, but I don't have a good feeling about it either. So, knowing that we have some limitations here, that's the issue with Type 1. If you got one to run, it would print just as crisply and beautiful as the newest typeface file types, OpenType and TrueType. You would notice no difference on the paper between that and one of the newer ones. The biggest difference would be computer compatibility, and if it was able to be functional at all, you'll be doing all right. So TrueType. TrueType sort of halfway mitigates the problem of platform specificity. So you have the issues with the older ones where you have a Windows font or a Mac font, and yeah, they're the same thing if you get them to print, but good luck opening it if you have the wrong version, because that's the world I lived in, with that great unbridgeable rift between the Windows world and the Mac world. And I grew up on the Mac side. Not by choice. I don't know. Maybe I would have chosen it, but because my dad was in print graphics, I was going to grow up on the Mac side of that rift, and all my friends are on the Windows side. It was a strange day when I learned what the right mouse button did on a mouse. To quote my friend Carl, growing up when he was showing me this thing, it's called right click, you crack. Anyways, interesting guy. So, the low ASCII characters, the basic common 128 characters of ASCII are the same. And 128 sounds like an awful lot, but it's not. 128, when you're talking Roman letters, English language, you have your 26 letters, and then you have them again. And that's 52. I know this because of cards. But anyways, you have 52 characters of that 128 are spent only on your letters, uppercase, lowercase. After that, you have numbers. There goes 9 more. And you have the basic punctuations, exclamations, at signs, pound signs. Yeah, I'm old. You would know them as hashtags, probably. Dollars, percents, all that stuff. There's another 10 gone. Then you have a tilde and a stress, and you have a few other moments here on the keyboard. And once you've gone through all the basic punctuation that gets commonly used, you've run out of characters, which is okay if you're only working with English language and you're only working with even basic English language spellings. So, because even then there are ligatures and special characters in English, because there are actually, in fact, more than 26 letters. I believe I've showed you in the past when you have FL, like in fluoride, mandrake, or in fluid or flower if you spell the other kind of flower. If you have those types of letters where two stick together, those are extra characters, and those are not in the 128 basic Mac and Windows compatible ones. What this means is when you're using these if you're using a TrueType font and you're switching between Mac and Windows, so long as you're only using the normal 26 letters that everybody recognizes from the alphabet song growing up in English, and numbers 1 through 9 in basic punctuation, you shouldn't notice a difference. But America isn't cool because we're homogenous. America is cool because we're heterogeneous, and the world market is pretty much open these days. Maybe not right now during COVID as much, but the international market for print and for everything is all over the place. So you may not be able to rest on only English letters. Working in a very small print shop in Chino, I know I've mentioned in the past about this last job I had before I started teaching, where there were 5 of us in the shop, including the owner, who also wore like 6 hats himself. Even us, a little tiny shop there, we printed internationally. We sent postcards to Canada, and we sent postcards to Mexico, and we sent postcards to Colombia, of all places. Did you know there's a huge market for custom furniture down in Colombia, especially in Medellin, as it turns out? I'm wondering where some of the money came from that these fancy furnitures are being bought from, but hey, I'm only a printer. Anyways, the point being, even on our own continent, our nearest neighbors to the north and to the south, even if it's not the whole country, Canada, require the use of French characters and Spanish characters, respectively. And those are not the same on Mac and on Windows. Remember that typing an Enya on Mac is really easy. It's Option tilde and then an N, and the person drops the tilde and puts the N under it. No problem. If you're trying to do an Enya on Windows, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Let me look it up real fast. Turns out I was a little wrong on the Mac one too off my memory. When I actually typed it, my finger memory was different. On a Mac, it's Option N and then an N again. So the N is going to drop the tilde on top of it, and then the N will put an N underneath. If you're trying to type the same Enye on a Windows machine, you have to hold down Alt and then type 164 to do it. And 165 if you want an uppercase Enye. Although those are much more rare because you don't really start a word with Enye in Spanish, as far as I know. I don't know Spanish that well, but I did take a few years in high school. Anyways, I don't know of any names that start with a capital Enye, but you may be doing an all caps thing and you have to be able to type that in. So the point is not that it's more difficult on a Windows computer. That's not my point at all. The point is that it's different because to you, the human, you see the N with the squiggly on top and you know, oh yeah, Enye, no problem. But it's not an Enye to the computers. To a Mac, it's an Option NN, and to a Windows, it's an Alt 164 or 165 respectively. That means that if you type one on one system and you take a file from a Windows to a Mac or the other way around, those letters will come out as unknowns. Sometimes it'll give a random error code. Sometimes it'll put in one of those empty square boxes you get when you don't have a character. But you have to watch out about the Windows Mac compatibility here. Because you run 128, again, sounds like a whole lot of letters that are common, but really quickly you run into the ones that are mapped not the same. And again, when you're dealing with even slightly international customers and you're writing in Spanish, heck, even local customers, there's a lot of Spanish language literature that gets mailed out in my own neighborhood. Right here in Southern California, it's not that surprising. And heck, there are Vietnamese neighborhoods which use the French letter set because they've borrowed or been given, perhaps forcefully. I'm not here to talk politics on this one, but they do use the French letter character set. Remember, I'm a printer, and what matters to me is printing correctly. So that means that right over there in Orange County, you might be sending mail that needs to use French letters to spell things correctly. And right here in OC, you need French and Spanish letters. So 128 characters goes away fast the minute you have to start writing Enyes or those C's with the squigglies on them, like in Francois. I don't know what that letter's called. Sorry. Anyways, so the high characters don't quite work. You really have to watch out for that. Also things like ligatures and fractions. But my issue is mostly with the international, it's not even really international, the multilingual characters. Once you start using even the Roman alphabet for non-English uses, you run into those problems really quickly. This video is getting long enough, so I'm going to cut us off here. Only a few slides in. I'm very sorry. I'll try to do the rest in only 2 more videos for the sake of all of you watching. My grandpa always says, the mind can only learn as much as the butt can sit.